Hey folks, Dr. Lava here. Well, last week we talked about the Islands and Dungeons cut from Wind Waker's release version, along with the canceled sequel, Wind Waker 2. Today we're going to have a look at some really interesting cut content from the Breath of the Wild that got as far as concept art, coding, playtesting, even manga in one instance, but never made it to the final release. So in no particular order, here's the top 4. According to the game's director, Hidemaru Fujibayashi, the developers knew from the very beginning that they wanted to shed the series' typical conventions and make Breath of the Wild into a completely different kind of Zelda game. Following the game's release, longtime series artist Satoru Takizawa explained that in the midst of all their brainstorming about what new direction to take, one early idea that was floated, but obviously never implemented, was aliens invading Hyrule, abducting cattle, and just generally raising hell. So great was the existential threat to Hyrule that Link and Ganon were going to have to combine forces in order to fend them off, as we can see from this Legend of Zelda Cosmos Edition manga, which also reveals Ganon to be a huge Metallica fan. Okay, but before you cry foul, saying this is all too far-fetched and completely out of character for a Zelda game, don't forget that Link already had to fend off an alien invasion of Termina in Majora's Mask, while protecting cattle from being abducted no less, so the idea of Link fighting off aliens in a Zelda game isn't completely unprecedented. Just about everybody wanted more divine beasts in this game. Well, it turns out that Nintendo actually had a few more up their sleeve. In the Japan-exclusive hardcover publication, Breath of the Wild Masterworks, concept art is included that reveals 6 more divine beasts that didn't make it into the final build. A giant mechanical crab that scuttles along the beach, a manta ray that swims under the surface of the ocean, and a massive brachiosaurus that roams around Hyrule's landscape. This land-walking jellyfish seems clearly inspired by the tripods from the War of the Worlds. Honestly though, I don't know what the hell this one is supposed to be. It may be a chimera from Greek mythology, which is a fire-breathing lion with a snake for a tail, but usually those are depicted as also having the head of a goat on their back, so I'm not really sure about this one, and the Japanese text doesn't clarify either. This divine whale may have been cut pretty late in the game's development, because both of the game's tech labs and the release version are full of drawings and models of the game's divine beasts, and the Hateno tech lab still has a large wooden model of a whale hanging from the ceiling in the final version of the game. So with that in mind, and considering where the 4 release version divine beasts are located, my best guess is the whale was going to be here, in this big empty Nucleus Sea area, right next to the tech lab. Probably the crab would have been located on the southern beaches, because there are long stretches of barren coastline and not much really going on there as far as story, beasts, or shrines in that area. As far as the other 4, your guess is as good as mine, so maybe in the emptiest regions of the game, here, 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 and maybe here. But who knows? On to number 2 on our list. Breath of the Wild came really close to having tiny little people and tiny little villages scattered throughout Hyrule, and Link would be able to shrink down to their size and go on microscopic adventures, experiencing the world like the little people do. But like the invading aliens, it wouldn't have been the first time for a Zelda game, as this is the same mechanic that was at the center of 2004's The Minish Cap on Gameboy Color. But this time, it would have been a miniature world on a massive scale, and in 3D to boot. Unfortunately for Minish Cap fans though, the developers ultimately decided it was going to be too difficult for the little people to stand out in such a massive game world that already has over 300 NPCs running around, so they didn't make it into the final build. Director Fujibayashi sounded like he desperately wanted to include them though, during Nintendo's mini-documentary, The Making of the Breath of the Wild, so I'd say there's a good chance we might see little people in the eventual sequel. In an interview with Kotaku, Fujibayashi explained that several classic Zelda items were experimented with and tested for Breath of the Wild, including the double hookshot from Twilight Princess and the beetle from Skyward Sword. I don't think the hookshot needs any introduction, but the beetle, in case you didn't play Skyward Sword, flew around under Link's control and grabbed items, cut ropes, and dropped bombs on enemies. Reverting back to the tried and true system of finding unique items in each dungeon, and even renting items at a shop, like in A Link Between Worlds, were ideas that were considered during development. But in the end, they wanted the player to have the ability to go anywhere at any time once the player descended from the Great Plateau, and having areas only reachable with items like the hookshot would just get in the way of their goal of unrestricted open exploration. The game's producer, Eiji Aonuma, told IGN, in the early stages of development, we did actually do some tests with double hookshots and just being able to kind of go anywhere, like Spider-Man. Your mobility and your speed was just kind of incredible. But honestly, the hookshot kind of completely breaks the climbing mechanic. I eventually just had to say no, the hookshot is gone. For a while, I was holding my breath that at least one or two of these ideas would be implemented into Breath of the Wild through a second season of downloadable content. Concept art for the motorcycle was in Masterworks 2 after all, and it was eventually patched into the game in the last batch of DLC. But unfortunately, Nintendo announced after the Champion's Ballad that the game was finished and the DLC train had come to a stop. So we can only hope that the time that they saved by skipping out on DLC Season 2 will mean a quicker turnaround for the next Zelda game, and that it'll come to the Switch sooner rather than later. Okay, there were more concepts cut, like the Wii U gamepad being used as a second screen with a map and touch controls, Hyrule being an active war zone, and there was some more interesting concept art from the Japan-only Masterworks publication, like early designs for Hyrule's Guardians that, frankly, I like a lot better, Goron Mount Rushmore, a reprogrammed Guardian that tips his hat to you at Robbie's lab, and a pre-apocalypse castle town, maybe just used for flashbacks. But like always, this is a best of list, not an exhaustive list, so all that other stuff is just gonna have to get honorable mention. Okay, for more Nintendo Cut content, subscribe and check out our past videos. As usual, if there are any corrections to be made, I'll put them in this video's description, along with all my sources. Okay, thanks for watching. See you next time.